Welcome to the new format for Great Lakes Church online and the Great Lakes Church podcast. Services now available on demand Sundays at 9 o'clock a.m. Central. Announcements available at the beginning of each service. To skip to the talk, please refer to the timestamps in the description. Enjoy the service.
We have a new crew member today, Denise.
Hi, everyone.
So I thought it'd be fun if we all went around and said our name and a little something about ourselves. I'll start. My name is Rod, and I like to party.
Hi, my name is Dave, and I like to party.
No, Dave, I just said that I party, so maybe do something different.
I'm Rico, and I like to party.
Yeah, Rico, what did I just say to Dave?
I like to party. I'm Rod.
No, you're Kevin.
Right. Kevin. I party.
No, you don't. Okay, nobody parties but me.
Yes, and we party.
No.
Yeah, just Rod.
Yes.
And me.
No, I'm the only one who parties.
I'm pretty sure I've partied before.
No, Kevin, I know for a fact you don't party, okay? You do not party.
You're right. Dave's the party guy.
Hey, my name's Carson, and I like to party, and I'm hoping that whatever your name is, you like to party, because we've got something just around the corner called the After Party, which you can see details for on screen right now. It happens at both of our campuses, and it's under an hour. It includes free food, free childcare for the duration, and an opportunity to build relationships with some new people who might be sitting in the seats around you. Regardless of how introverted or extroverted you are, there is a place and there's an opportunity for this place you're in right now called Great Lakes Church to be more than just a place you show up on Sundays, but to become a place where you feel known and seen and supported. And hey, by the way, if you're one of those people in the room right now who decided to try Great Lakes Church for the first time today, we want you to know that we want you here and that we are ready to have you. And part of being ready means that we have a gift at the Next Steps table for you. You can go ahead and claim it. All we're gonna ask, grab that yellow connection card in the seat back pocket in front of you, fill it out with as much information as you feel comfortable, and then they're gonna swap you for that at any of our physical spaces. And if you're joining us online, we have a different protocol for you. You can see it right here, and we're gonna ship you that gift in the mail as our way of saying thanks. Now, if you were here for our Christmas services at the end of 2022, you were able to see the many ways that we linked arms with organizations all across the Southeast Wisconsin area and the globe at large to make a difference in our world. Part of that momentum carrying through the end of the year was with a partnership through Kingdom Builders in Racine. Every Christmas, Kingdom Builders hosts a toy drive for kids in the area who are underserved, who may not have access to a Christmas gift otherwise, and they give away tens of thousands of toys with no red tape. If you want one, come get one. And a bunch of Great Lakers showed up. We love Kingdom Builders, and they actually gave away 3 million plus pounds of food last year. We believe that the good they're doing in this community is something that we should get behind. And so we try to, as many times as we can throughout the year, if we have an opportunity to serve with them, don't miss it, but thanks to those of you who already have. If you'd like to move forward with us this year as we continue striving to be an outrageously generous community that does good in Southeast Wisconsin and far beyond, you can do so in any of the ways that you see on screen. And regardless of which medium you choose to give in, you can know that it'll go towards the causes that are listed on the impact page at greatlakeschurch.com. And we are always looking for further ways to innovate and love those around us well. So thanks for making it possible. Again, my name is Carson. I am super glad that you're here, and we're kicking it over for our weekly talk, our encouragement in just a bit. So get that note sheet ready. Thanks for being here with us, and enjoy the service.
Well, a few weeks ago, we kicked off a teaching series that we're simply calling Bless. And to bless someone means that we add value to their life, right? And it means that we're looking for ways to project good on people, to encourage them, pray for them, find ways to help them. And of course, several ways that we can do that. Last week, we talked about one of those ways. We said we could begin with prayer. We can pray for our neighbors, our coworkers. We can pray for our family members and acquaintances. We can pray that God opens our eyes to different opportunities and help us be creative and think of different ways that we can bless people, that we can add value to them, that we can show them we care. All right, and so what I want to do today is I want to talk about 2 other ways that we can bless our neighbors. The first one of those is by listening. Now, there's a game that's been around for like 25 years called Mad Gab. And over the years, there's been similar games, right? One of them, probably the most modern of them, is Incoherent, but they're all kind of played the same way, and that is there's a series of small words, and they're real words, and they're strung together, and when you read them as they're strung together, they don't make really any sense. But if you read them fast enough, they can actually sound like real phrases, and so kind of the way the game works is you have to guess what phrases those are. So let me just give you an example here. You've got 3 words: high, dance, eek. High, dance, eek. But you read them quickly enough and the team gets going and there's energy and adrenaline, and of course the answer would be hide and seek. All right? You understand how it's played? All right, so let's try a few. Here we go. These if he'll war. These if he'll war. These if he'll war. The Civil War. Well done. Well done. How about this one? Ride out these dorm storm. Ride out these dorm. Yes, ride out the storm. We had an extra word on there. I don't know where that came from, right? How about this one? Real agent SIP goals. How did we get the answers on here? Relationship goals. Screw this, man. All right, we're going to do the last one. Here we go. East Sung Gopher. East Sung Gopher. He's hungover. Oh, is he talking about me? Yes, I'm talking about you. But you get the point, all right? The only way that you are going to be good at this game is if you're really, really good at paying attention and listening and maybe on a few psychedelics, all right? So, listening, come on, not something that comes natural for most people. And that's because most people, like the average person, speaks at 125 words a minute, which seems pretty fast, except for our brains are high-powered computers, and we process information a lot faster than that, which is why when someone's talking to us, we're like, please hurry up, right? It's why when someone's talking to us, our brain starts to wander. It's why we can truly be hearing what someone says. I'm not talking about listening at a high level. We can hear what someone says and even process that while we're on our phones, all right? It is a challenge to listen. It is not a challenge to talk. We talk all day long. We do it through text messages and emails and phone calls and face-to-face interactions and social media. We talk because it helps us feel connected. But what's interesting is there's been a lot of studies done on the different conversations humans have, and the studies reveal that 60% of our conversations revolve around ourselves. Like, we talk about ourselves 60% of the time. And if we're on social media, we're talking about ourselves 80% of the time. And so naturally, if we're in a conversation that isn't about us and that doesn't interest us, well, guess what? Our mind is going to check out. The average human attention span is 8.5 seconds. Again, it just speaks into this reason that we are not really good at listening, and yet listening is one of the most powerful and practical ways that we can learn to bless someone. When we tune in, when we listen to another person, it shows respect. It communicates that we care about what the other person is saying, and we value their perspective. When we listen, it helps us understand where someone is coming from. Now, that does not mean we agree with them, but it does mean we can see a little bit of their perspective. That's why if you look at someone in a heated conversation and you say, I don't understand where you're coming from, well, really what you're revealing is a problem you have. It means you haven't done a good enough job of really trying to listen to them. When we listen, it prevents misunderstandings and conflict and confusion. It allows us to create strong emotional connections with another person. And I think it goes without saying, but when I talk about listening, I'm not talking about hearing the words that are coming out of someone's mouth, right? We can all do that. But if we're not truly listening, it's just incoherent. It's hard to make sense of it, because truly listening is saying, man, I'm trying to connect with you. I'm trying to understand your hurts, your concerns, your perspective, your opinions, your dreams, your experiences. And that's what makes people feel valued. I love this Maya Angelou quote. She says, at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. We all have people in our life that we can point to and say, man, they make me feel loved. They make me feel cared for. Those are the people we gravitate towards. And listening is just a practical way to do that. But again, doesn't come natural. And it's the reason why James, who is the half-brother of Jesus, when he writes a letter to followers of Jesus in the first century, he feels it necessary to say this to them. He says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which should be an ongoing reminder to all of us that we should listen twice as much as we talk. And again, not easy, right? Admittedly, when I'm talking with people and I'm having a conversation with them and I'm trying to listen, it's hard for me. And it's not because they're boring. It's not because, well, they're talking about something that is of no interest to me. It's just, come on, I've got a lot of things on my mind at all times. And I know it's not helpful to blame anybody, but I'm just going to blame my mom because 50% of my DNA comes from her. And when my mom, this is true, when she has something on her mind, when she's preoccupied, she's like a robot. It's like, stay out of her way. And I'm not making this story up. This genuinely happened. It was a few weeks ago. I was at Chick-fil-A in Pleasant Prairie, which is where she works, right? She's retired, wants to stay busy. And by the way, last summer, recognized as one of the most amazing team members there, running the place. Yeah. All right. I kid you not, though. I show up a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine. He's never met my mom. And I walk in, and she's over in the area with the registers. And I point over, and I said, hey, that's my mom over there. And it was about maybe 15 seconds later, he goes, I think I'm looking at the wrong woman. He says, because that woman you pointed to, or I thought you pointed to, looked up at us and saw us, but she didn't smile or wave. I said, oh, no, that's my mom. Absolutely. And then it was probably 2-3 minutes later, because we were still standing there, she walks by with a tray of food, and I'm not kidding, probably 2 feet away from us, doesn't even acknowledge us and just goes. And he says, wait, I thought that's who you said your mom was. I said, it is. He says, she didn't even say hi. I said, oh no, she had to deliver a chicken sandwich to someone. Why recognize her offspring, right? But that is, by the way, that is my mom when she is focused, right? When she's getting her work done. That's how I am, and that's how a lot of us are. And if people are going to feel valued, at some point, we got to slow down, focus, and intentionally listen. We see this over and over and over in the life of Jesus. He was great at listening. On one occasion, we read this story about Jesus, and we read that as Jesus approached Jericho, a blind beggar was sitting beside the road. When he heard the noise of a crowd going past, he asked what was happening. They told him that Jesus the Nazarene was going by. So he began shouting, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Be quiet, the people in front yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. And when Jesus heard him, he stopped in order that the man be brought to him. Now, I want to pause this story so we don't miss what's going on. Jesus is making his way to the city of Jerusalem. It's one of the last stops he's going to make before the city of Jerusalem, where he's going for a Passover feast. And as you know, Passover is a big deal among the Jewish people. And so there's lots of people traveling on this road Jesus is on. It's like Times Square on New Year's Eve, right? Roads jam-packed. And in the midst of this large crowd of people, there is a guy who is blind. And he asks, what's all the commotion? Like, I know there's a lot of people here, but there seems to be some extra energy today. And so someone says to him, that multiple people say to him, well, Jesus is passing by. Now, I've said this before, but Jesus had a reputation that preceded him almost everywhere he went. He was a tremendous teacher. He was a popular rabbi. And on top of that, Jesus had a reputation that on occasion, he didn't do it all the time, but on occasion, Jesus would heal someone. And so this blind man connects the dots pretty quickly and says, if this is Jesus, I want his attention. And so he starts to cry out, have mercy on me. And somehow in the midst of all the noise and all the commotion, Jesus hears this one guy. It's like a mother who can hear her own child's cry in a room full of toddlers. Jesus hears this one man crying out to him as he's passing along the road. And even though everyone tells him to be quiet, he cries out even louder. And here's what happens next. As the man came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, he said, I want to see. And Jesus says, all right, receive your sight, your faith has healed you. Now, if you're familiar with Jesus and some of the stories surrounding Jesus, this is not a surprise ending. Right? You probably predicted it, because here's a man who cannot see. He is blind. He calls out to Jesus. Jesus stops and he heals him. The end. But that's actually not how the story completely unfolds. The way it unfolds is this blind man is calling out to Jesus, and Jesus stops and he asks the man a question. He says, what do you want me to do for you? That seems like a really lame question. Right? It seems totally unnecessary. The guy is blind. What do you think he wants from you, Jesus? But this is fascinating. Jesus doesn't make assumptions about the guy and what he wants. He doesn't jump to conclusions. He is going to let this guy speak for himself. And so he asks a question and he listens for the answer. This past summer, one of my friends here at this church, been with us from the beginning, Stephanie Tennyson, she passed away. And Stephanie battled muscular dystrophy, spent a good portion of her life in a wheelchair. And so as I was planning for her celebration of life, I was talking to her husband, Michael, and I asked what direction he wanted me to go. Because naturally, knowing that Stephanie had spent so much time in a wheelchair, at some point, I'm going to talk about heaven and Stephanie running down the streets of gold and skipping through the streets with excitement. She has been fully and completely healed. And so Mike and I get talking, and Mike just makes it clear. He says, hey, Dave, I actually don't want that. Stephanie doesn't want to be the focus. She had muscular dystrophy, but I want you to know that didn't define her. It wasn't who she was. He says, she wants Jesus to be the focus. She wants for this celebration of life to be focused on Jesus. She wants everyone to know they are fully loved and fully accepted by God. She wants us to celebrate the grace that's found in Jesus, because that's how she lived her life. He said her life was defined by the words of the Apostle Paul, who wrote, for to me to live is Christ. So the funeral went, the celebration of life went in a different direction than I was thinking it would naturally go. Don't assume that you know what people want. Ask questions. Listen to people when they talk. Pay attention to what's in their hearts. The Apostle Paul, in one of his first century letters, he puts it this way. He says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. He didn't say it's wrong to have interests, wrong to have needs and wants and desires. He says, but make sure you're taking an interest in other people too. And that means we're learning about them, which requires us to have conversations with them. And if we're going to have good conversations, it means we have to minimize distractions. We put away the phones, right? We try to zero in and make a connection and try to be present in the moment. And good conversations are often filled with just good questions. And maybe you don't feel like you're all that good at asking questions. I just want to pass around this little tip here. For several years now, I've just had this acronym that sits in my mind, and it's kind of interesting because we don't use acronyms a lot around here, and yet we're using two today. But the one is this, that the acronym would be FORD. Family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. So when I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, just kind of keeping this in my mind. Sometimes I ask about their family. Sometimes I ask about their occupation. And the way I phrase it usually is, what do you do during the days? Because I know some people are unemployed, or some people are laid off or retired. And so I just use that and go in the direction, well, what do you like, what do you do with your time and during the days? And recreation, what do you do for fun? Dreams, like what are some of the ambitions you have in life? What are some of the goals that you have in life? But it keeps conversations going. And one of the most practical ways that we can bless people is to listen to them. Now, I mentioned at the very start of the talk that we're going to talk about two ways to bless people. Last week we talked about begin with prayer. This week we talk about listen. And now I want to talk about the second one, which is eating with other people. All right, we live at a time period in history where there are endless cooking shows, TV chefs, and cookbooks that top the bestseller list. We have a complicated relationship with food, right? We love to eat. Now, the reason we love to eat is because God designed us that way, right? He designed us in a way that we would love food and that we would actually have to be dependent on other people for survival. This is fascinating, right? Because we like to think of ourselves as self-sufficient, right? We make our own way in this life. But come on, every single time we eat, we're acknowledging at some level we're dependent on other people. Every time I have a bowl of cereal, every time I have a burrito or a plate of spaghetti, I'm saying I am not fully independent. I depend on other people. I depend on God, right? And I depend on the other human beings that make this food happen. Because unless you have a homestead where you grow your own vegetables and milk your own cows and slaughter your own animals for meat, you're dependent on other people. Right, think about this. I have bread every single day. Every single day. Every morning when I get up, I'm not kidding, 3 pieces of French toast. It's healthy French toast. It is like 35-calorie bread or whatever. And I never really think about it, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in order for me to have that bread. Right? It takes a farmer to plant a seed and harvest the grain. It requires a baker to turn flour into bread. It then requires a truck driver to take and deliver the bread. And then it takes someone to advertise and market and promote it. And if I'm at a restaurant, right, and I want to eat, it takes a chef to prepare the meal. And then a server comes and delivers the meal to me. Every single time we have a meal, it's a reminder of how much we need one another. It's also a reminder that we're not invincible. We're not robots. We have a need for food. So if we go too long without food, what happens? We get angry. I was looking for the word hungry, but yes, we also get angry and bitter and mad, and we're on edge and irritable, right? And it's not always fun, because if you're having a really productive day and you're like, man, I'm getting so much done, our hunger often forces us to stop all the production and slow down and eat. But slowing down gives us an opportunity to connect with people in very unique ways. Right? You think about the meals you have with other people, the laughter, the drama, the prayers, the wisdom, the confessions, the friendships that are forged. Most of us have 3 meals a day, right? 7 days a week. That's 21 meals in 1 week. In 1 month, we have 84 meals. So what if we decided for just 1 meal a week, heck, 1 meal a month, 1 out of 84, I'm gonna be intentional about inviting someone to the table, someone to eat with me. Well, I don't like having people over to my house, then go out to eat. Well, I don't like going out to eat, then get a life, right? You gotta find a way to be intentional, push past the nerves. Jesus was notorious for this. Right? Luke, who was a doctor and historian and wrote a manuscript on the life of Jesus as he investigated the life of Jesus, he talks about how, on 10 different occasions, he writes about how Jesus was either going to a meal, he was at a meal, or he was leaving a meal of someone. Jesus and his disciples ate and drank so much with other people that they were accused of doing it to excess. And Luke actually writes about people confronting Jesus about this. Here's what we read. One day, some people said to Jesus, "Why are your disciples always eating and drinking?" Right? Why is it that you and your posse are always at some sort of party? Why is it that you guys are always trying to have a meal with other people? And the thing that's most shocking about Jesus is not how often he had meals with other people, but who he had them with. In the first century, meals were a very sacred time. It's hard for us to imagine this, right? Because we're on the go, we're scarfing down tacos, and we're trying to throw a hamburger down. We got French fries in our mouth, and we're driving with our knees, right? Trying to get from point A to point B. It's just like meals, the significance of them can get lost in us. But 2,000 years ago in Jewish culture, meals were a very significant time of the day where you would gather with your friends. And meals were a sign of friendship and unity. When you had a meal with someone, you were affirming their worth and their value and their dignity. It was a sign when people would see you eating with people that you were friends with them, you were accepting them. In some ways, that's true today, right? If you see me out to eat with someone, you assume that I am friends with this individual or I am forging a friendship with them, which isn't that big of a deal unless you know that person and you don't like them. Right? Or if I'm eating with someone who would be considered a polarizing individual. It's like, why would Dave be eating with that person? But that's what Jesus did. He would often have meals with people who were polarizing individuals. One of the groups of individuals that he would connect with on a regular basis over food was tax collectors. You might remember this. A couple weeks ago, we referenced a guy named Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. And we talked about how tax collectors were bottom rung of society. Because if you were a Jewish tax collector in the first century, it meant that you were working for the Roman government and you were collecting taxes from your own people. And when you would collect taxes from them, you had a reputation of lying and exaggerating how much they owed. So you would be stealing from your own people, right? Bottom rung of society. But Jesus often had meals with tax collectors. Matter of fact, he invited a tax collector to be one of his disciples. His name was Matthew, and Matthew writes a manuscript and documents the life of Jesus, and he writes about Jesus calling him, and he talks in the third person. Here's what Matthew writes. He says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. And so Matthew got up and followed him. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? When Jesus heard this, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. So for Jesus to avoid sinners, which is all of us, for Jesus to avoid sinners would be like a doctor avoiding sick people. A doctor that avoids sick people is not doing their job. And for Jesus to avoid someone in need of grace would be opposing and working against his own mission. And when we look at the people who Jesus spent time with and how he interacted with them, it gives us a glimpse of what God is like, because Jesus is God in the flesh. And what we see in Jesus is that he was constantly leaning in the direction of those who disagreed with him. When we look at Jesus, we see he was not afraid of guilt by association. That's a pretty big deal when you think about it, right? Because people in general, I'm not talking about just religious people, right? I'm not just talking about people who are, have something that they don't want other people to know about them. Like people in general, we're driven by the fear of perception. We have a high level of concern of what people think about us, but we don't see this in Jesus. Matter of fact, he was accused of being a friend of sinners. That was his reputation. Here's one of the things people said about him. They said he's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners. That would be said about some of you, right? That was said about Jesus. In other words, Jesus spends way too much time with people that he should not spend time with. And the assumption, of course, is, well, if he's spending time with people who are stealing from others and cheating from them, then Jesus must be okay with stealing and cheating. But he wasn't afraid of guilt by association. He would hang out with leaders of different political parties, people of different belief systems, people of different backgrounds and different worldviews. If you're having a meal with someone, it is one of the greatest opportunities that you will have to forge some sort of friendship. If you combine the things we've been talking about, you begin with prayer, and then you're intentional about listening, and now you're having a meal with someone. You see kind of the progression, how things just start to string together. Now all of a sudden, people who felt like they were your acquaintance are becoming your friend. And when you're listening and you're having a conversation, you're having a meal with someone, the challenge for all of us is that we would be driven or guided by the words of the Apostle Paul to followers of Jesus in Colossae when he says, let your conversations be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. He said, when you're having a conversation with someone, be so full of grace that people who do not think like you, people who do not believe like you, still want to be around you. Because you're just so full of love and hope and compassion and encouragement. In other words, let's avoid emotionally charged discussions and debates that push people away. Let's be known, let's have a reputation that when we get around people, they feel and they sense that we are for them even more than we are for ourselves. The mission of this church is people helping people find and follow Jesus. Not pastors helping people find and follow Jesus, not church leaders helping people find and follow. It's people helping people. And the challenge is that you and I would link arms and that we would all agree we're going to collectively work together to be part of the faith journey of other people. And I know it's intimidating, I know it's awkward, and everybody feels like, oh, I'm unqualified and I don't have enough theological understanding and knowledge of the Bible and all that fun stuff. But I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't have to be scary and intimidating. You just have to decide, I'm going to be someone who blesses others. And throughout this series, if you haven't been here the last couple of weeks, we're using the word bless as an acronym. I didn't come up with this, but I adopted it because it just makes sense to me. It goes like this: begin with prayer. Again, God, open my eyes to opportunities, to how I can bless people. Give me creative ideas on how I can add value to people. L is for listen. I'm intentional to listen and to hear what's going on in the life of other people. We talk way more than we listen. And so when we listen, it has power. E is for eat, right? We say the quickest way to go from being a stranger to a friend is to have a meal together or a drink together. S is for serve. We find ways to help others. We find ways to show people we genuinely care, that we're interested in them. And then eventually, if we do these things over time, it may be months, it may be years, but eventually our faith story, we're gonna have an opportunity to share it. We're gonna have an opportunity to open up. We're gonna have an opportunity to talk about why we follow Jesus and why we sense our ongoing need for Jesus. And we don't have to pretend we're perfect. That's why we say, hey, I follow him and I need him. If I was perfect, I won't need him. So my question to you today is, who can you be praying for this week? And who can you intentionally be listening to? That maybe you're always on the run, and maybe when you're in conversations, it's always quickly in and out. And who can you be intentionally listening to as a way of adding value to them, as a way of making someone feel like they're being heard? And then sometime in the next month, who can you invite to have a meal with you? Who, at this point in your life, your acquaintances, or you see each other in passing, but man, just gonna get to know them. And I'm not gonna wait for some little lull in the conversation to say, oh, by the way, let me tell you about my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. No, you're just developing a relationship. Your story will come. That day's gonna come. You'll talk about, man, my life used to be so messed up, and I got connected to this church that came out of heaven. And it was, no, that's how it's gonna go. It's not gonna go like that, right? You're just gonna say, man, here's a little bit of what's been happening in my life and kind of my story, but that day will come. Starts by begin with prayer, listen, and then make sure you're taking time to eat and develop friendships. You're serving and eventually sharing that story. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are a God of grace. You are a God who rescues us from the power of sin. You're a God who extends mercy and compassion to us. I hope and pray that we will never lose our understanding of how much we need your grace, of how much we need your love. May we never lose our sense of our ongoing need for you. And I pray today that where our lives are out of sync with you, where we're kind of on our own and doing things independently, I pray that you would bring those things to our mind and we could realign ourselves with you. I pray, help us to grow at praying for others and listening to others and eating and having meals with others so that eventually our faith story just becomes a natural part of who we are and flows into our everyday conversations. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for joining us. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. You can hang out with us every day at greatlakeschurch.com, the Great Lakes Church app, or on socials at Great Lakes Church. We'll see you next time.